Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Cassidy, the owner and clinical director of the Anxiety Treatment Center of Greater Chicago, and it's my privilege to introduce Sydney Fratura Kampschroer. And Sydney is one of our terrific staff who just loves working with anxiety. So Sydney, I'd love to ask you, what is it that makes you think working with anxiety disorders is so much fun?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Karen. I think that overall I really like how treatable anxiety disorders are and how effective cognitive behavioral therapy is as a treatment. I really like seeing how everyone's life can open up. So the impact of anxiety and just really making your world smaller, and how with treatment, how your world can get bigger and how you can enjoy doing things. It's really nice to be able to see that change within someone's life.
Yeah, I know that's one of the things that I love about working with anxiety is in such a short period of time, you can make an incredible impact on someone's life and see them go from completely disabled to living out in the world and doing things they never thought possible. When you're working with people who are anxious, what do you see as some of the greatest struggles that they have that are common to patients who have that problem?
I think one of the greatest struggles is probably underestimating their own ability to cope with anxiety and with different feelings, and also different situations too that bring up anxiety. So I think that's really common. If you underestimate your ability to cope, then it makes a lot of sense that you wouldn't try and that you would avoid certain things if you don't think you'll be able to do it.
Right. Yeah, one of the sad things is anxiety really can be a terrific blow to your confidence. And we hear that from a lot of people where they say, I used to be the person that could do so much, and look at me now. And you're absolutely right about that. If you had some hot tips that you wanted to give someone who is struggling to overcome anxiety, what would you tell them?
I would probably say the first tip would be to try your absolute best to not avoid situations that make you anxious. And I know that's a really big step, but if giving a speech at school or if going to the mall on a really crowded day, if something like that makes you a little bit anxious, I think a really good step is to try to go into that situation and kind of let yourself feel anxious as you're doing it, but you're still doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and in fact, I'd say that's our motto here is we want you to learn how to do the things that are difficult for you to do rather than to just understand it or think about it or talk about why it happened. And to go out and live, right? Yeah, I know one thing you enjoy, talking about and working on is perfectionism. Could you tell me what is that? What do you mean by perfectionism?
Yeah, absolutely. So perfectionism is really when you have an overly narrow definition of what it means to do well. And then you also are kind of overly critical of when you make mistakes. And so then the impact of mistakes seems to be more significant.
Right.
For the perceived
And
mistakes.
how common is having difficulties with perfectionism in people with anxiety?
It's very common, and it makes a lot of sense that if you're worrying about a lot of different things, or if you're worrying about doing well, that you also would want to be able to do whatever perfect means to you.
Right.
That would be what you're striving for.
Right. And one of the interesting things is we know from research that perfectionism puts people at risk for anxiety disorders, and that unfortunately people with really good perfectionism actually pride themselves on it. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be really tricky too, because it's kind of this, if it makes you feel like you're striving for the best, and if you're striving to do well, that's something that's so kind of, forgetting the word, but like people really appreciate that in our society, and high achieving, and so that confusion between the two can come up a lot as well. But it can also, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It can also kind of stop you from trying too, and so kind of that fear of failure can lead to procrastination, which I know a lot of people have experience with. So that's kind of the downside of when you're striving for perfection too.
You brought up so many good points there, because one of the things that we see is that the prevalence of perfectionism has been going up in society, and that social media may even be making people more at risk for that because they mistakenly think everybody's doing so well. And that is a horrible feeling to have. Well, Sydney, thank you so much for talking with me, and we look forward to working with you. Bye-bye.